Welcome to the Mick, a Mook, and a Mike. Hosted by four-time Emmy-nominated producer Frank Mace and retired New York City firefighter, 9/11 first responder, and Vietnam vet, Billy O'Connor.
Today's guest, Umpire Joe West and ex-LA Times columnist T.J Simers.
There he is. Look at it. He's got the red shirt on. He's got the red one on. The red Joe West shirt on. All right.
I got the black Joe West shirt on.
I put this one on to match my neck.
And we're off.
And we're off.
Hey, Joe, meet T.J Simers.
Hello, Joe. How are you?
Hey, TJ, how are you?
Excellent.
So,
Great.
Derek, when
Great.
you're
I
ready,
saw your last interview with these guys, and I was really embarrassed that you got to go to a garage to do this. I mean,
They've already been giving me shit about crumbs on the floor. What difference do it make on this crumb dumb place?
can you get your napkin off the table?
No, I'm not. I'm trying to be polite.
You can eat off the
I guess
floor.
in a garage I can just throw it on the floor.
You want a sandwich? You can eat off the floor. Yeah. Clean joint.
but that was the one thing I noticed about Dodger Stadium that was different from every other ballpark. When the O'Malleys owned it, it was clean as a whistle.
Yep.
You could actually eat off the floor. It was that nice.
And did you find anything remarkable about Angel Stadium?
I just thought the Angels tried to copy Yankee Stadium. I didn't see that much as an improvement. I think the rocks in center field and all that was nice, but I mean, I thought Dodger Stadium, and I always have thought, was our best ballpark that we ever had because it was made for baseball by a baseball person who knew what was going on, and so I always thought that Dodger Stadium was our. I still think it's the best stadium out there.
Really?
Did you know that Peter O'Malley lived in an apartment above Dodger Stadium for a period of time?
I did not know that.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that's why he had such aspirations about building a football stadium out there between the parking lot and the city line. That's where he wanted to put a football stadium.
Now who owns the parking lot? Your buddy
Frank McCourt, the Boston parking lot attendant.
Yeah. TJ used to call McCourt the Boston parking lot attendant. Actually, he still does on his Twitter, which you can read at TJ Simers page 2 on Twitter.
I wouldn't go that far.
What's the site?
That's it. But I wouldn't make an extra effort. But I certainly wouldn't tout it to a guy like this.
Well, what do you mean? Just because 43 years in Major League umpire, 5,400.
By the way, I don't know why
games?
the hell you retired. Baseball needs guys like you. I can't stand the sport anymore. It's so damn boring.
Joe, would you like to say something about this? Would you like
Well,
to
about me wanting to keep going, did you notice that they wouldn't let the umpires announce the replay until I retired?
No, I didn't pay attention. I wasn't paying attention to the sport.
Why is that?
Yeah. Well, they didn't want me to come on the air and say, "Yeah, the son of a bitch is still out."
I like it. That's why we needed you.
But almost as soon as you retired, they got the pitch clock. So now 3-hour and 15-minute games take 2 hours and 5 minutes.
Yeah, I could have worked another 10 more years if I'd known they were going to do that. But you know what? I used to yell at them to get in the box, and they'd get mad at me. The players would get mad. And I'd say, "I don't care. Get in here. You're taking too long." And I did make a statement one time that the Yankees and the Red Sox did not adhere to the commissioner's edict on picking up the pace of play. And I got in all kinds of trouble from the news people. Only one guy really took up for me, and that was Joe Madden, the writer out of New York.
Yep.
And Joe Madden hates me.
But how did you handle criticism? Did it roll off of you, or did you?
You can't answer the writers in any shape or form because they have the right to do their job and to say what they're.
Yeah, but you're not answering my question now. That's why they never let us talk to you umpires, because you wouldn't answer the questions directly. Did you get hurt? Did you get hurt?
I find that very hard to believe, especially since you worked with Bob Hunter.
No, that was before my time.
How long were you there?
40 some years.
Wow.
But I've almost matched your. I was a little longer little older than you, probably.
Well,
how old are you?
I'm 72.
Oh, you're young.
And
You're the young guy.
No, Joe's the
And
young
I'm-
guy.
Oh, Joe's the young
I'm
guy.
70.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
Shit, I got a ball spot that's 70. I'm 75.
But you know, we don't want to hear about your labor pains. Just show us the baby. You know what I mean? But the main point of this is Bob Hunter used to tell all his cronies of writers that were out there to go down and ask the umpires, say hello, introduce yourself. He said, Bob used to tell them, like the guys like Gordy Varel and Terry Johnson, Ken Gerdak, and those guys, say, go down there and introduce yourself to the umpires, because it's hard for you to go in after a game and ask them a question about a play they've had when you've never met them before. And so those Dodger beat writers would come around and say hello. I thought that was pretty classy. You know, the only other guy that used to do that was Rick Hummel out of St. Louis. But I can't say that because Joe Durso did come around.
So are you going to ever answer my question?
How did I take the criticism?
Yeah, did it hurt you?
Some of them did, because some of them were blatant lies, you know. But you can't do anything about that.
You know,
you
but
have
there's a
to-
portrayal when you're like an umpire that it's like you're bulletproof, that criticism will roll off your back. You're a human being. Did it?
That's right, yeah.
Did it get you down? Did it make you mad? Did it make you sad?
Well, you know, it didn't hurt me as much because I didn't have a family full of kids at home that were reading the same thing in the paper. And my wife Rita was used to it. She used to go watch the games, and she just cringed when people would yell at me. She said they'd yell your name on a play at second base, and you'd be working first. For the most part, there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, I can remember one time when Paul Carrollson went on a tirade because I called a balk on his favorite pitcher.
No, it wasn't a tirade. It was more of a rant tirade. He went off on you big time.
It was bad.
Yeah.
It was bad.
It was bad.
And-
Actually, it
and
sounded
they-
good. It sounded good on the radio. It did.
Well, you know,
And he's the same guy that came to my locker room after I survived my little bout with throat cancer and said, you can fight me, you can screw me, you can beat me up, you can throw something at me, but don't you die on me, you son of a bitch.
Yeah. Years later, he would talked about what a great umpire you were. That day, that never came across his lips as he was defending Burley.
let me tell you about the power of the press. TJ and I used to play golf quite a bit. He would never beat me, but whenever he said, doesn't make any difference whether you win or lose. They're only going to know what I tell them in the paper. And then he wrote the paper. That he beat me every time. And that's all. Everybody in Los Angeles thought, that T.J. Simers could beat me in golf, which he couldn't.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the way it's supposed to go. The writers are the ones with the last word. An umpire might think that when he calls them out at first, that's the last word. But by God, I'll be there writing in the paper that you blew it again.
I can remember one day I had an argument with Joe Torre when he was managing.
I got to bring that up. Hold on before you start. What the hell is wrong with you? Joe Torre is one of the nicest, coolest, maybe one of my 3 favorite people in sports. Congenial, gentle, and you pushed him.
I pushed him.
You pushed him.
You're talking about a different play. I'm talking about when we had.
Well, of course you are. I'm talking about when you pushed him.
Well, he followed
got
us into the
suspended.
umpire's tunnel. He followed us into the umpire's tunnel.
Right.
So I put him back and said, "You don't belong in here." And he realized he didn't belong in there, and he left.
But it cost you a game.
Actually, I got suspended for 3 games. Yeah,
Yeah. I think they
but I got paid. I got paid for them. So I find a big amount of money for following me in there. But one day I had an argument with him in Dodger Stadium, and it was over something, and we're arguing back. We're like 2 little kids. No. It's back and forth, back and forth. So I go back to first base, and Steve Garvey puts his glove up and looks at me, and he says, "You know, you have the last word, whether you take it or not." And that was a good piece of advice, you know. I have the last word. There's nothing Joe Torre could do to me out there, but I can get rid of him.
So I have a new story that I can write for the paper or the blog.
for the blog at TJ Simers, page 2.
Joe West listens to Steve Garvey, takes advice from Steve Garvey.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you should be taking advice from everybody out there. You should be learning from everybody out there. I can.
Hell no, I've seen the readers' comments. There's no way in hell I'm going to listen to those people.
Why do you write for them?
I don't write for them. I write for me.
We kind of figured that out with the last interview.
TJ, did you know that Joe West was the all-time leading quarterback at Elon College?
Elon, yeah. And your numbers were really good.
Well, back then, because we didn't throw the ball a whole lot. I mean,
but I think you had like 18 touchdown passes.
Yeah, that was the last year, I think.
Well, don't go humble on me. Tell me about it.
Well, we had a pretty good team. We were second in the nation that year, and we were number one going into the last game with Abilene Christian, and they had a running back named Wilbur Montgomery and a quarterback named Clint Longley.
Yeah.
And if you think Wilbur Montgomery ran good when he was with the Eagles, you should have seen him run against us.
So keeping that in mind, do you watch football now?
Not so much. You know, I'm kind of like Jim McMahon. You know, when they started taking a knee for the national anthem, it really upset me. That really bothers me that you would, especially in this country where you have all the benefits of making something out of yourself, and you're going to belittle the national anthem. I don't think that's right. So there for a while, I didn't watch it at all. But
so you quote Steve Garvey, and then you're quoting Jim McMahon. Jim McMahon blew his nose on me. It was a big story in San Diego.
Why did you tell us that story?
Yeah. So when he first came to San Diego, he didn't want to talk to any media. So I went to him every single day. And on his first day, he wouldn't come out of the locker room waiting for us to leave. So I parked the golf cart against the back door to lock him in so that he couldn't get out. And when he finally did come out, he started swearing. And I went to him and I would ask him each day, you know, what the hell's wrong with your offense? What's going on? One day I asked him, what's wrong with your 2-minute offense? And he took his finger inside of his nose and blew it on me and said, there's your answer. And that became kind of a cause. If he had punched me, everybody in San Diego would have been thrilled. But because he was so disgusting, it cost him his job, and he was sent to Green Bay after that.
He hit you with a snot rocket.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Jim McMahon, your guy. You're a guy. And tell me you're not wearing red because it's a Trump thing.
Oh no, I'm fed up with him.
Okay.
I cannot stomach his bullying and his arrogance.
Okay.
But you live in a
I'm really not happy with Biden either. But
and you live in a state with Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, I really don't know which way this country's going when these are the only candidates we have to vote for. I did see where Kennedy's kid made a speech, and he didn't sound too bad. But I look at these polls that they're taking, and I see that all the GOP congressmen and senators they're backing Trump. And somebody asked me about that the other day. I said, well, that's because they're afraid of what he's going to do if they don't back him.
Mm-hmm.
And they're scared of his repercussions. And why? You can't back this guy because he's not going to be good for the country. I mean, do I believe he did some good things? Yeah, but he just did some good things. He didn't do everything very well. I mean, let's be serious. You're gonna build a wall across all the borders of Mexico? Well, didn't they have somebody that dug out of a tunnel in a prison down there? They don't think they're going to dig a tunnel under the wall. I mean, they're going to come in whether you stop them or not. The bad thing is if you do start stopping them, you've got to deal with the cartels because they're sending the people over, and that's their bread and butter. So I think the sad part of that is I don't think Mayorkas has done a good job, and I'm really sad that we've come to the point where you got to push people away, and for the life of me, how do you bring them into the country, give them a couple of $1,000, give them a cell phone, and put them up in a hotel? when we have homeless veterans on the street. I don't get that.
So what office will you be running for?
Commissioner of baseball.
Yeah, no, I don't want that job.
Yeah.
I don't.
But what's your
Although it pays a lot better than the presidency would. You know.
That's true.
Speaking of Trump, did you consider yourself a bully?
Well, I just considered myself doing my job.
But when you threw the fear of God into different players, or what, do you think people were afraid of you?
I think they might have been afraid of what I might do.
Okay, so possible repercussions.
Repercussions for what?
Well, would you take something out on a player if he really reacted violently to a pitch that was called, and then in your inner core you thought, yeah, maybe it was a little borderline? Would you go after him?
No. If he did something that I had to feel like I had to get him back, I should have kicked him out of the game. I actually said that 40 years ago. If a player does something to you where you think you got to stick it to him, then you should have kicked him out. And it was really funny because when I first came up with the guys I worked with, I remember working with Doug Harvey and Frank Pulley and Jerry Crawford. You'd have thought I was a choir boy on that team. I mean, I can remember another Steve Garvey story where he was playing first base for the Padres, and they had already given Doug Harvey the nickname God.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he had actually ran in and covered the field before it rained, and then there was a deluge coming down. Dick Williams said, "That's it, you're God from now on." So sure enough, we're in New York at Shea Stadium, and Gooden's pitching for the Mets, and they don't want to start because it's raining. And the Padres don't want to start either because it's raining. But if we don't start the game, we're not going to get it in. So Doug starts the game. In the first inning, they had a ball to Garvey at first base. He waved the pitcher off. He slipped in the mud going to first base. So it was the first error he'd made in like 10 years. And so he's not happy. And of course, the Mets scored a couple runs. And we played a couple more innings, and then it started raining so hard we couldn't see each other. Doug called time, stopped the game. We go running off the field, and the only guy standing out in the rain from the Padres was Garvey, and he's on the top step of the dugout. And sure enough, he stops me. He didn't dare stop Doug, and he didn't dare stop Crawford or Pulley, but he stopped me, and he says, "Joe, did any of y'all check the field?" And I said, "Yeah, Doug checked the field," and behind him was Terry Kennedy. He said, "Yeah, but that son of a bitch can walk on water. How does he expect us to play in this shit?" And so I went in the locker room laughing, and everybody said, "What's so funny?" And I told them the story, and of course everybody laughed. And it was about a week later we went back to Chicago, and who comes in our locker room but Jerome Holson?
Mm-hmm.
He was another guy that would stop by the locker room.
Famous writer for the Chicago.
Right, yeah.
Sometimes, I think.
Yeah, and Jerome started talking, and Frank Pulley said, "Joe, tell him the story about Doug in New York." And so I told him that story. The next day in the Tribune, the headline on the sports page said, "God visits Wrigley." And it was
So, Joe, did you ever get that game in? Did Garvey's error
stand? We finished it. We finished it. We covered the field. We waited about an hour, but we got the game in.
Hey, I want to do one thing. Billy, is your microphone on?
Yeah, but I'm enjoying the conversation.
You know that guy? Do you have any idea who that guy is?
Waiting for an interlude, a brief interlude.
Do you need to hear from him?
Do you need to hear from Billy?
What, do I owe you money or something? Why would you need to hear from me?
I don't know. All of a sudden, we're like, there's a request to hear from Billy. I never made that request.
I did. Hey, Joe. Joe's your name. Why don't you give TJ 3 strikes? Every time he asks a silly question like, "Do you need to hear from Billy?" If you think that's worthy of a strike, give him a strike, and at three strikes, we'll throw him out of here.
He's done. We got rid of him out of the game.
Huh?
We got rid of him. He's out of the game. He's out. He's already been ejected.
Yeah, well, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. I hope.
And like, where are you sitting, TJ? I mean, if I'm out of the game, where are you sitting?
I'm in a garage, yeah. Good point.
Good point.
Hey, on an average, how many times a year would you throw a guy out of a game? How many times would it happen? 3 times, 4 times a year?
I think I had 196 ejections in 44 years.
I tried to look it up, and I couldn't find it.
What's that about? Is that about 4?
About
4 a year.
4 a year.
96
Yeah.
divided by 4. 4 goes into 16, 36, 40. That's 4.9. 4.9 times
So
a
about
year.
5 times a year you throw somebody out of a game.
How many times did you throw Earl Weaver out?
Twice.
Yeah, and how many times did you play against Earl Weaver?
I only had Earl in 2 games.
It's pretty funny.
So I can honestly say he never finished the game I was in.
Wow.
You know, he was fiery. You know, I had Billy Martin in one game. I never threw him out.
I covered the Yankees back in 78 and 79 for a paper in New Jersey. And Earl got thrown out before, right when he was turning in the lineups. He got thrown out. I don't think you were there at that game, probably.
No, because we were working just National League back then.
Oh, okay.
The only time I had Earl Weaver was in the spring training game. So he's not one of the 196. They didn't count that. But, you know, Dick Williams was tough.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to get him once a year. Early in my career, I used to get Chuck Tanner. And I think Bobby Cox passed all of them before it was over. I actually kicked him out in a World Series game. And it was, he threw a helmet down in the dugout and it bounced out onto the field. And so I find the player that had just struck out and they all yelled, "He didn't do it, he didn't do it." So I said, "Okay, who did it?" And Bobby jumped out in front of everybody. He said, "I did it." I said, "Well, then you're out of here. You're gone." So that was my only ejection in a World Series. So
You did 6 World Series, is that correct?
yeah,
Yeah.
6.
Did you have a favorite?
I liked all those that just went 4 games. Like when the White Sox beat Houston, that was a good one. And what was the other one? I think the Giants beat the Tigers. That was a good one.
They were 4-game sweeps?
Yeah, both of those were 4-game sweeps. And
But come on,
but that's funny.
weren't you a fan of the game?
Well, I love the game and I love the way it was made. And I grew up in the game. You know, I played from Little League to high school, American Legion, all that stuff. And it's really funny. When I was 12 years old, I was sitting in the stands at a Little League game in the same league I was playing in. And the parent that's supposed to work the bases didn't show up. So this guy named Pete Caraway was one of the coaches of, I think the club was called the Optimist. And he said, "Well, let Joe West umpire the bases. He can do it." I was only 12 years old. So first game I ever umpired, I was umpiring the bases in the same league I was playing in. So, and after that, when I went off to college, you needed a little spending money. And I used to umpire the local Babe Ruth games and the Legion games, and I actually umpired college games before I got out of college, and that's where this guy named Malcolm Sykes saw me work, and he said, "You know, if you're going to do this, you'll learn how to do it right." And he was the supervisor of umpires in the Carolina League, so he took me to some clinics, and he gave me like the umpire school test. And when I went to umpire school, I was so far ahead of those kids that they didn't have a chance. So I was first in the class. They sent me to one of the better spring training camps over in Lakeland, and right away they throw you right in there behind the plate. I think the first game I worked, Joe Coleman was pitching. The second game I worked, Mickey Lolich was pitching, and so I mean I had Carl Yastrzemski that spring, and when the Red Sox came over to play the Tigers, so I knew it was time to retire when I had Yastrzemski, and then I had his grandson. So
that was a hint.
If you go to umpire school, Joe, how many guys actually graduate from that and go on into the league? It's not an automatic just because you go to school. You're going to be a pro.
Well, some of it's based on the openings because now they have it set up where the umpires have to go through all the levels of the minor leagues. when I started, they could put you anywhere, and I started in the high A league, and then I went to Double A and Triple A, and I made it to the big leagues pretty quick. But now they make them go through every level, so it takes them a little bit longer. But in the umpire school, there's probably, I think the class I had, there was 3 of us that made the big leagues.
Wow. And how many guys were in the class?
130.
Wow.
And the class before us had Palermo, Mike Riley, and a couple of other guys. They had like 4 or 5 that went. That might have been the biggest amount that ever came out of one school. And then, and today, back then, there was 2 schools. They had the Wendelstedt School and they had the Umpire Development School. And today, there's only one umpire school, and that's still the Wendelstedt School. But yeah, if you look at it and you take the percentages of who's going to make it, you would never apply for this job because it's a long way to get there. And I was very lucky, I got promoted because they were looking at a minority umpire and he couldn't handle the work. So Fred Flagg told Barney Deary, who was in charge of the minor leagues at the time, he said, I want that kid, I don't want the other guy. He said, you can't have him, he's in Double A. He said, promote him. So then they took me to spring training, and I worked my first spring training in 1976, and at the end of the year, they gave me 8 games in Atlanta. So that's how I got started.
How did you get along with Lasorda?
But, I made a statement about him one time. I said, we don't see him unless the TV cameras are running. And he was, I'll give him credit. If he ever met you one time, or met your family, he had a memory like an elephant. He never forget it. He was really good that way. And the reason he was so good with those Dodger teams was because he brought them up, through the minor leagues with himself. And I mean, most of those guys had played for him before. And I think he was really full of himself, and he made sure that everybody knew that he was there, But
was he a fair arguer?
Yeah, but there again, he was there to protect his players. I remember one time he got in an argument with Mark Hirschbeck, and Mark was a brand new umpire, and so I came down from third base to kind of break it up, and he turned around and said something to me. I said, Tommy, you're doing pretty good over there. You don't want to argue with me. He turned around and but he was there to protect his players. He was not the fire and brimstone guy that Dick Williams was, and we had some interesting managers in the National League. We had Leland and Whitey Herzog, Tony La Russa, and we had quite an array of good managers. Joe Torre started with the Braves. Mm-hmm. Actually, he started with the Mets. Yeah. He was a player coach for the Mets. I had him as a player. So that tells you how long I was there. And it was really funny. As a player, he could have been the most sarcastic person you ever be around. And as a manager, he realized, I got to manage this group. I can't. I mean, one time he walked behind me at home plate because he just had an argument at third base. And he said, and he knew I was looking at the pitcher, and he was managing the Cardinals at the time, and they weren't doing very well. And he walked behind me, and he knew I wasn't looking at him, and he said, that just shows me how horseshit you guys really are. And I wheeled him out of the game so fast.
Whoa.
And of course, he turned around and raised his hands like, what did I do? And of course, Jack Belk and Mike Shannon on there, they were burying me because I threw him out. And I didn't even have to play. The third base umpire had to play. So he knew how to set you up. I mean, he was good that way. And he got me really good one time when I went over to the dugout. Dave King was playing first base. And Dave said, hey, Joe, doesn't the pitcher have to be in the on-deck circle? And, a lot of teams would try to put somebody out there so the pitcher didn't have to go stand out in the heat and everything. I said, yeah, he's got to be. So he pointed over the on-deck circle. So I went over yelling at the guys in the dugout. The pitcher's got to be in the on-deck circle. Joe said, Joe, he's not the next hitter. And another time when he was managing St. Louis, Eric Gregg, you remember Eric Gregg?
Sure.
Great big heavy set umpire. He had bought a pair of custom-made leather pants. And so between innings, I went over to talk to the trainer, Gene Gieselman. I said, Gene, you're not going to believe this, but Eric had a pair of custom-made leather pants made. And Torrey looked up and says, what herd did they kill to make that?
Hey, let's switch gears a little bit. You were president of the Umpires Union, and Billy's a big union supporter.
Sure.
And TJ, I don't know what you do, but does the writers' strike, TV and movie writers' strike, have any effect on the general public at all, or is everybody just in our industry just playing with themselves, thinking anybody cares?
Is that for me?
Yeah,
What a stupid question. It has nothing to do with baseball, for God's sake. It's a writer's strike.
It doesn't have.
It's all, wait. Just because he was a writer, now we're supposed to care about a writer's strike?
I care about a writer because you're a writer.
God.
He's a union president. So it's
What's that got to do with anything?
It's applicable. One strike. I'm going to throw you.
That's strike one. That's strike
That's
one.
just strike one. So
I've seen your strike zone. I'm not worried.
And here's what you're trying to get at. If you'll remember when we had the COVID situation and all the games were shut down and everything, did you notice how many games were shown as replays on television, like this World Series and this playoff game and that playoff? The problem with the writer's strike is they could stay out for a couple of years and television wouldn't care because they'll just put reruns out. Much the same that they would do with baseball. When you don't have baseball, they'll put it out there, but it just won't be current. It won't be live. And so the writers are going to have a real problem with this strike. And they, I don't know exactly what they're asking for, but in certain cases, I can remember in '79 when I was just getting started, we knew that it took over $110 a day to live on the road. And we were only getting like 48. And so we had an informational picket. We stopped going to spring training. We didn't go to work. And baseball, after the fiasco they had with the umpires that crossed the picket line, they offered us $90 a day per diem, and because it was almost double what we were getting, we took it. So certain things like that happened, and we didn't get enough, even though we were in the right, because expenses aren't negotiable. And in fact, at one time, our attorney said, well, we'll just turn in expense vouchers. Of course, baseball said, oh, no, we're not doing that. So, but the point being, this writer's strike will take a little while to settle unless they get some people in there that are willing to negotiate, much like the McCarthy-Biden situation. That's not going anywhere. I mean, they're going to pay their debt, and they don't care what the GOP does or what the Democrats, they'll pay the debt because they're not going to default.
Well, you were out of the game for 3 years at one point. Was that because of the strike?
2 years.
2 years.
I was out of the game for union activities.
Right.
And what is how would you define union activities?
Well, we turned in a resignation, and then we rescinded our resignation, and according to the basic agreement, they had to hire you on the basis of skill and merit. And when we took it to court, we got, of the 22 that were fired, 18 of us got back. And the 4 guys that were let go, they were let go because the arbitrator kind of split the baby, and that's why all but 4 of us came back. But, and mine was pretty successful. I mean, I got back pay for the 2 years and plus interest. I think my interest payment was $167,000, so I was happy, Mike Shannon, who just passed away, he said, "You got nothing to worry about. You'll be out for a couple of years, and then they'll have to pay you and give you back pay." So, and that's exactly what happened.
You also took LaDuca to court.
Yeah, I beat him.
Yeah, that was impressive. I'm someone who's a little bit familiar with court, and for you to hold him accountable, I give you high marks in that. And LaDuca's a friend, but he was wrong.
Yeah, what he said was wrong. That never happened, and he knew it didn't happen. He was just making up a story. So,
he was affecting your credibility, which exactly. For an umpire, you can't have that.
That's all you have.
Yeah.
Speaking of court cases, since you brought it up, how is your court case going, or how has it gone, or is it in what's going on?
Joe, I sued the LA Times, which, by the way, I wouldn't recommend doing. But I sued the LA Times because they tried to mess around with the column I was writing. They didn't fire me. They tried to demote me. So I sued them. And we went through 3 trials. I got awarded $7.1 million by a jury, and then the judge took it away. The appeals court said I was right. Let's have another trial. Then I won $15 million, and the judge took it away. Same judge. Third trial, I won $1.25 million, and that was all right. The judge said, "Yeah, give them the money." They still haven't paid their legal bills, which are about $4 million now. And so we never got anything out of this darn thing. But we did the right thing. We went through the court process. And I was impressed that you got yours done and through the court process. And, hopefully LaDuca learned something from that.
Well, hopefully a lot of people did, because it was kind of a landmark case where you defame somebody and you tell something that's totally not true, and there's no liability for you making up a lie. So that, I think a lot of people learned from that.
So can I use your lawyers?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
What did he say exactly, LaDuca? What did he say that defamed you?
Well, he said that Billy Wagner came in relief and told him to sit off the plate, and he was going to throw every pitch off the plate, and I was going to call him strikes because he would lend me his 57 Chevrolet to drive around whenever I was in town. Well, first of all, I wouldn't be called dead in the Chevrolet. I'm a Ford guy. So,
that's how you won the case.
And then I went and looked up every game I had with Billy Wagner and Paul LaDuca. And I think I had 2. And I only think he struck out 1 in each game. But LaDuca said that I called 3 Atlanta Brave hitters out on 3 pitches, and each at bat, all of them off the plate. And actually the media picked up on it, and they're the ones that buried LaDuca. And I didn't have to do anything until I got to court. But that was what he said, and it just wasn't true.
So you love sports writers. You love sports writers. Is that really what you're trying to get to?
Oh yeah, I think you guys are great until you guys
I was in journalism school. I was with a kid who eventually ended up working for the Inquirer, and he said the difference between the Inquirer and regular papers, real papers. You call up a newspaper, and you say I got a talking dog. You're still gonna hang up on you. You call up the Inquirer, you call me and say I got a talking dog. I'm gonna tell you, put the dog on the phone. Let me talk to the dog.
I don't know who he's calling a dog here, you, TJ.
Well, I think I've heard that at ballparks, so I don't think it's a stretch right now. You probably have heard every name in the book as an umpire.
What's some of the favorite things that you've stayed with that people have called you out of the stands? You remember it?
Well, the first game I ever worked was an exhibition game with the Inter-Squad Pirates, and I was in umpire school. They took me down there to be the first umpire to work this spring training thing, and I was still in umpire school. And first pitch came in, I called it a strike, and somebody in the Pirate dugout says, "Great, you missed the first pitch of the year."
Nothing downhill from there on, huh?
Oh gosh, I mean the lines you're like, why don't you try looking between the bars instead of through them?
Mm-hmm.
Or how did you get that square head of yours and that round mask? And I I mean, some of these, they're really hilarious. I was working in the Astrodome one day, and in the first inning, this spectator in like the second row starts screaming at me. And Johnny Bench said, "Is that your pass? Did you leave this guy tickets?" And I just kind of laughed. And all the way up to the fifth inning, the guy yelled about everything. And finally, in the fifth inning, his voice cracked. And Johnny turned around and said, "You finally got him."
I know you're going to find this hard to believe, but this year I was thrown out of a high school basketball game.
Wow.
By a referee who couldn't see, who obviously was blind as whatever, but he was calling everything against my granddaughter's team. And they ended up losing to a team that they would eventually beat by 60 the next time they played. It was the most scoundrel activity I've ever seen in a sporting event. And the guy, I said to him as they were getting ready for a free throw, "Sir, you're just horrible." And he said, "Get him out of the gym. Get him out of the gym." So I got ejected.
Wow.
Hard to believe.
For the word horrible.
Yeah, get thrown out. A grandpa getting thrown out of a game.
Yeah, but not your normal grandpa.
That's true. But Billy, did you notice that you and I are the only ones that aren't wearing glasses?
Yeah. Maybe you can get me a gig now that you retired. Maybe you can get me a gig.
I notice you're not
in the big
here
leagues.
and you're staring into some oblivion kind of space. I have no idea if you're blind right now.
Well, that's another one of my favorite stories is about Yogi Berra.
Who I loved, by the way. Loved him.
I was playing in a golf tournament in Sarasota just about a year ago. And Ron Swoboda was there.
Mm-hmm.
And Ron used to announce for the Mets after he quit playing. And so he recognized, he called me and said, "I got something to tell you. Come here, I got something to tell you." And he said, "I only hit 2 grand slams in my life. And the second one was in Crosley Field. And it hit a plywood partition behind the left field fence. And you could hear it hit the plywood partition, and it came back on the field. And when it did, the umpires left it in play. So I not only didn't get a grand slam, I got a single because I can't run too well, and I lost 2 RBIs. And so I figured every reporter from New York is going to be in my locker after the game, and I can't wait to tell them, I hit another grand slam I didn't get credit for. He said, but not one writer came to my locker. They all went to Yogi's locker. And the question was, "Yogi, what did you say to the umpire to get kicked out?" And he said, "I told him, if you couldn't hear that, you're blind." Now, Swoboda, I laughed, and Swoboda said, "That's not the funny part of the story." I said, "Okay." He said, "The funny part of the story is not one of those New York writers cracked a smile, because that's the way Yogi talks."
Mm-hmm.
But I just went to see the new Yogi Berra documentary in New York, and his granddaughter put it together, and it's an amazing picture.
She was a sports writer.
I think, I think she worked for MLB.com at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But
And that was produced by Peter Sobolov, who's a mutual friend of ours. He's an Academy Award winner, and I'm looking forward to seeing the Yogi documentary.
Yeah, I'd like to see that myself. I heard nothing but good things about it. It's supposed to be terrific.
I think it's going to open in LA the 12th of this month. So you guys need to go see it, because it's an amazing story from the time he was at D-Day. A lot of people don't know that he was on the beach at Omaha Beach in D-Day. And he actually told his kids, he said, "There's no pressure in baseball. Pressure is when they're shooting at you to try to kill you." But he was quite the person. I had him as a coach. I actually had him one time as he managed the Yankees. I'm trying to remember exactly what year it was, because we went to the Dominican Republic, and he was the manager of the Yankees. And here we are doing 2 exhibition games with the Astros and the Yankees. And the first time we come to the locker room, there's 25 umpires in the locker room, all Dominican umpires, and they want to umpire the game. So I looked at him and said, "Well, which one of you wants to work home plate?" Well, not one of them wanted to work home plate. They wanted to work places. And anyway, so I've got a little problem here, because we don't want to start an international incident. So I called Yogi, and I forget who was managing the Astros at the time. Maybe it was Garner. But anyway, I said, I got a problem here. I said, I got a bunch of Dominican umpires in here that want to work the game. And Yogi had a fit. No, don't kid. And I said, well, Yogi, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put him in the outfield. We're going to switch him out every 3 innings. He said, oh, thank God. But anyway, so that's what we did. But that was the only time I had Yogi as a manager. But the year he managed the Yankees and went to the World Series, I think they lost to the Cardinals in like 7 games.
7 games.
And then
they let him go.
Yeah, they traded managers because Johnny Keane became the Yankees manager, and Yogi didn't become the Cardinals.
No, Yogi left there and went to coach for the Mets, I think.
Yeah, and Johnny Keane, who beat him, became the Yankees manager.
Right. Yeah. But that was before I got to the big leagues. But tell you how long ago that was.
I got a question.
Sure.
Did I cut you off, Joe?
No, please.
Okay. I got a question for the guest in studio. And you guys were talking about
in the garage.
You were talking about movies earlier, and I wanted to know if there is a movie. So you're a big time writer for a big time newspaper.
Was.
Now reaching thousands and thousands of people on at T.J Simers page 2 on Twitter.
Page 2, yes. I want to know if there's a movie that represents that experience.
The baseball experience.
No, the experience of being a writer working for a big time newspaper. So meaning like
front page.
Front page. Cary Grant comes to mind immediately, right?
Well, if you watch the one with Michael Keaton, The Paper.
Yeah.
But the ultimate movie for any journalist, and Joe might know this, is Humphrey Bogart in Deadline USA, back when he was just a pup. That is the quintessential journalism movie.
Why?
And it's just Humphrey Bogart, tells a kid, if you want to be a foreign correspondent, can you speak their language? Can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do that? When you learn all that, you come back and see me. And he ends the movie by holding the phone out for the roar of the presses as he's talking to some gangster and says, "Here, baby." That's what newspapering is all about. So I think in a way it's like asking. I got goosebumps when I watch stuff like that about my profession. Did you ever get goosebumps watching something about your profession?
No, most of the stuff they do about my profession is mistakes that we made. So I don't get goosebumps. I get angry about it. So.
What about baseball?
What's your favorite baseball
movie?
Yeah.
Well, there was an old movie called Long Gone. It was a minor league team, and it was about minor league players, sowing their oats and getting to where they're going to get a chance to go to the big leagues. And it was an old movie, but it showed a lot of what happens in baseball that you don't really see. And that's why I kind of gravitated to it. I thought Bull Durham was funny, but a lot of that was just putting a bunch of good actors in the film and not so much about baseball. I thought the movie Costner did when he was throwing the no-hitter.
Perfect Game.
And the game played out, and he remembered everything that was going on in his life, and he was trying to get back with his wife and stuff. I thought that was a pretty good movie, but it's really funny because they actually used real umpires in that movie. I think Jerry Crawford, Richie Garcia, and Rick Reed did the umpire to that. So,
how about The Natural?
Yeah, but The Natural was a fairy tale. It was.
But isn't that what baseball is all about, in a sense? For most kids, when they grow up, it's a fairy tale.
Well, I think you're right. I think if you've ever given a little boy or a little girl a baseball, you don't know how valuable they are till you see their eyes light up and see how happy it makes you. But the Natural was okay, and it was one of those things where, again, they use such quality actors to play the parts. It's Redford Redford played that part, and he did a decent job at it. But to look at how he got that job, he had to be the Sundance Kid before he could get a job like that, you know. And I think it's kind of funny that they made that such a big deal. I mean, Frank, you did a baseball movie that was as good as any of them because it was legitimate, you know. So why don't you tell TJ about that and ask him why he didn't promote it?
He's told me 100 times, go watch this movie. Go watch this movie.
Yeah, well, if you ever watched this movie, I wouldn't have to keep telling you.
Oh my God.
Stephen Lang, Babe Ruth.
I did a couple of baseball movies. I also did A Winner Never Quits with Keith Carradine playing Pete Gray, who was the one-arm outfielder for the St. Louis Browns in 1943. But speaking of movies, you know, the Coronation was recently passed. Joe had the pleasure of acting in a movie with Queen Elizabeth. Isn't that right?
Oh, that's
That's
right.
exactly right.
Wow.
Did you meet her?
That's exactly right. Yes. And
And what'd you say to her?
well, I said hello.
You're out of the game.
Did you say, hello, Your Majesty?
Whoa.
Yeah.
You did?
I think I said Your Highness. I don't think I said Your Majesty. But anyway, Reggie Jackson was supposed to kill her in that picture, and he didn't make it. So, and it was really funny. We had a beanball situation, or something happened, and there's a big fight on the field.
We're speaking of the movie The Naked Gun.
Yeah. So the first time they shot the fight on the field, there was 3 former big leaguers that had me on the ground and they're beating on. One of them was going, "This is for Rocky Mountain, and this is for Kinston," and I've had dirt all over my uniform, and they're laughing like hell. But yeah.
Can I tell you a quick baseball story?
Sure.
You talk about the Queen. So Vin Scully had a chance to meet Pope Pius XII. And he comes from a Catholic family. And his mother was just like over the moon excited about her son is going to, and he went with Ralph Bianca and Ralph's wife. And they go into this private room and he goes in and it says his hands are sweaty and he's lost it. And the Pope starts to go around the room. There's about 10 people in the room and gets to Ralph and he knows all about Ralph's career and talks to the wife and he gets to Vin and he goes, "You're with them, aren't you?" And he goes, and he moved on. That was it. That was his experience with Pope Pius XII. Wow. That's vintage Vin Scully.
Yeah. Well, he was so modest anyway.
Well, that was his philosophy. Always leave them wanting more.
Yeah. I used to take my hat off to him when I'd walk to home plate the later years that he worked. And he would stand up and wave. He was cool that way.
He's one of TJ's favorites.
Yes.
Wow. Who else?
Well, he's a Los Angeles icon, you know.
We did a show in the Nokia Theater right across the street from, I don't know, they call it the crypto thing or something, where the Lakers play. And there 7,000 people, and I don't know TV at all. I'm sitting out there. They want to give me an earpiece, and I won't wear it. And we had John Wooden. It was John Wooden and Vin Scully were going to appear. And Scully was afraid that Wooden was going to die that night because Wooden was at the end of the ropes and just looked horrible. And so he thought he was going to have to control the show. And Wooden ended up controlling the show. But I asked Scully, I said, "Would you please lead these people in a song?" Because he was in a barbershop quartet. So I'm thinking I'm putting him on the spot. And of course, he'll take me out to the ball game is what he did. And at the very end of the show, he wheeled Wooden out in front of the crowd. And it was something I learned about him that night. He came in thinking he was going to have to do everything. And when he saw Wooden's eyes light up and get fired up about being there, he stepped aside. And he let Wooden have the show and took his place as second fiddle. And I thought that was the coolest thing.
That's great.
So yeah, I'm a big fan of Scully's.
You know, you mentioned take me out to the ball game. Joe, you've got some roots in St. Louis now. Stan Musial played the greatest version of "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" on his harmonica. He would play it every year at the Hall of Fame, and he actually wouldn't take Stan very much to pull out a harmonica and take me out to the ball game. But that was a nice moment every time I heard that song.
Yeah, well, thank God he could play it well too, because when Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson and Chris Christopherson and Johnny Cash were doing the Highwaymen, making that tour, every time Chris Christopherson would bring out his harmonicas, Waylon would steal them and step on them. we don't want you playing those things.
Well,
and he'd go and buy some more. Waylon hated it when Chris would play the harmonica.
TJ, are you a country music fan?
No, I can't stand the stuff. So I wasn't surprised that he was interested in it.
Are you Joe? How many albums have you cut?
I've been on 3 albums. One of them was done with Bucky Pizzarelli, who was a guitar player for The Tonight Show. And it was called the Texas Tumbleweeds. I did 2 songs on that. And then I did the Blue Cowboy song in the middle 80s, or the Blue Cowboy album. And then I have an album that's all baseball stories called Diamond Dreams. But he, TJ sounds like Buddy Rich, the famous drummer.
Mm-hmm.
He went in for heart surgery, and nurses writing down all his vitals. And she said, "Mr. Rich, are you allergic to anything?" He said, "Absolutely." She said, "Oh, what is that, Mr. Rich?" He said, "Country and Western music."
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Why haven't you played for us or sung a couple of songs?
How about next time you're on?
I can't believe that my album's not up there behind If These Lips Could Talk.
That's right. Right.
Yeah.
I would tell you to send us one, but I was afraid you would.
Actually, we got a place for it.
Yeah.
What did Jim Palmer say when we saw Joe West? Tell him I've got his album already. Every time he sees me, he asks me if I got my album. You got my album? Jim said, "Tell him I got the album for sure."
Yeah, you know what? I'd have been a millionaire if I didn't have to pay for that return postage on those things.
That's hilarious. Wait! I know you're gonna shift gears a little. Can I ask another question to the this is a group of massive wisdom.
Massive age.
Oh,
God,
massive age.
Talk about suck-ups. I mean, how did you deal with suck-ups?
Oh, this is not a suck up. I'm just trying to give you your respect.
All right.
But I have a question about. So, TJ, you spent a lot of time in your profession. How many years?
40-some.
Okay. And Frank, you've spent how many years in your profession?
70-some.
Okay, and that's hilarious.
My father says I'm a bullshitter, so I'm a bullshit.
70-something.
He said if bullshit was music, I'd be the whole brass band.
And what about you, Joe?
I was in the big leagues for 44 years. I was in the minor leagues for 4 years. So, 48 years?
Okay. So what would you say are the top 3 differences in your profession,
Changes?
compared to when you first started? So we have obviously the advent of the cell phone, and I know the internet was around close to that 40 years ago. So what do you think is the biggest changes now compared to in the past?
Joe can start.
Well, the players today are bigger and stronger and faster.
Okay.
And yet they don't play the game as a team like they did when I first started. It was important to play like a team, or you really did win. And the pitchers back then all threw strikes. That's why the games were an hour 50 and 2:10. You wouldn't have had to put a clock on those guys. I mean, my first game in the big leagues behind the plate, I had Phil Nieper and Joaquin Andujar. It was like an hour and 57 minutes. And it's because they threw strikes. Today, and you saw it a little bit the other day when the Yankees took out a pitcher who had a shutout and gave up a hit the top of the 9th inning, and they took him out because of the analytics. You didn't have any analytics back then. You'd go out and ask Tom Seaver, "Are you okay?" And he'd tell you yes or no. Seaver would actually tell you, I got nothing. If you want me to stay, I'll stay, but I got nothing. Or he'd say, "I got this." But you don't have that anymore, and you got a whole bunch more agents who think they're smarter than the game. Some of them are, but most of them aren't. And I think the problem in baseball today is a lot of it's being run by the agents and the analytics.
They didn't have GoPro in those days either. That's where the game really went to hell. Batters stepping out of the batter's box to readjust their gloves, and you know, and you guys allowing it. I mean, it was terrible.
I had Garcia Parra one day at Dodger Stadium, and he'd take his gloves on back and forth. And I said, you know, I watched Jack Nicklaus play one day, and he put his glove on when he got out of the car, and he didn't take it off or adjust it for 18 holes. What is wrong with you? You don't know how to put that glove on? He stepped back in the box, he never touched it again. But if you don't stay on them, they're going to continue to do it. I think we had a union meeting one time, and one of the umpires in the back of the room said, you know, our problem with baseball is we are the only ones telling the players, no, you can't do that. The owners don't tell them, their agents don't tell them, the managers don't tell them, and we're getting in trouble because we're doing somebody else's job. And he was right. You know, when you tell a guy get in the box, he needs to get in the box. When you say play ball, they need to pitch. They need to go. But I think, like I said, the player today is bigger and stronger, and they're being paid so much money, they don't have to get a job in the off season. They're year-round athletes. Well, back when I started, they weren't.
They don't have to get back in the box either now. Because
they don't, they'll strike them.
Yeah. But they don't have to listen, and they'll make a big issue out of it the next day.
Yeah.
What about TJ?
Your job,
what about your business?
Yeah.
Access. In my day, I got to know all the really big time players. I mean, I could sit right across from them, call them names, you know, tease them, prod them. Now you can't get near them. Locker rooms are there, but players are in their players' lounge, or now they also have their own website. They don't need you. Print media has gone the way of dinosaurs. Yeah. So it's a TV game now. It's strictly play to the cameras. And I mean, people that are celebrities on TV now get interviews because the players know them rather than knowing the print media who is covering them and supposed to know the day-to-day stuff.
And didn't you recently write in at T.J Simers page 2? Didn't you recently write that the L.A. Times now is not going to publish box scores?
Yeah, no more box scores in the L.A. Times because they can't meet deadlines. Now they're going to have a deadline of 6 p.m. and the Dodgers don't start until 7. So they're not even going to have the game story in, and that will all impact baseball. I mean, the Dodgers have a baseball, I don't know if you're aware of this, the Dodgers station where they broadcast games, a good portion of LA can't pick it up because of the deal they struck. LA is eliminated from their TV coverage. So it's they're just bad moves being made instead of for the betterment of the game.
Billy?
What about journalism itself? I mean, the clickbait and all that stuff, it's changed so much from your day. I mean, 40 years, you must have seen changes that are just...
Do you have any idea what clickbait is?
No, he doesn't even text.
So I mean, but it's such I mean, your game has changed so much, it's ridiculous, right? I mean, the changes you've seen over it. And do you think that the isolation of these ball players because of the money they make, is it that why it's so hard to get access to them nowadays?
The access, they don't need us.
Yeah.
The minute they get a paycheck, we're unnecessary.
Well, but let me ask a question about that. Don't you think that it's don't you think there's more access because of social media, because of iPhones?
No.
So you think that we don't get...
You may get a couple more videos than you wouldn't have seen in earlier years.
Okay.
But by and large, no. I mean, they control the media.
Controlled access.
It's all about controlling the media and the message right now. So as being a rebel, and I'd go in and I would, get Kevin Brown all riled up. Or Reggie, I got all riled up in New York. I could get away with that because he'd have to talk to me.
Right.
And I just write down what he said and how he behaved, and I shaped his personality from a newspaper point of view. Now they don't even have to meet with you.
What sort of rumblings are you hearing from So, okay, you don't have access, but you must still have some people on the inside that get stories that are not told to the general public. Do you have any stories like that?
It's hard to do now,
Okay.
because you have to get to know these people as people, and like umpires. Umpires always made the mistake of going into their little room and closing themselves off to the public. Now, you just told me something that was very interesting, how the Dodger beatmen would go in and introduce themselves or talk on occasion before a game. But that was incredibly rare, and it certainly didn't happen in my time. It should happen. I mean, I should know. I mean, I used to meet Bruce Fleming at Bullies in San Diego, the bar. And I knew Doug Harvey because he was from San Diego. So I got to know them. And so I gravitated more to their side of an issue or story just because I knew him as a person rather than as an umpire. But that very seldom happens.
But I think that was Bob Hunter's point, was to go meet the guys that you want to talk about.
You keep mentioning a dead man who I've never even heard of. So, get more contemporary than that. I do have to ask you, I know there's one guy who was working against you to get into the Hall of Fame, and I'm not a big fan of his. So I'm curious what motivated him. You know who I'm talking about?
No, I think I read something about it where they said there are more people more deserving than me. But
John Hyman.
Yeah,
John Hyman.
Yeah.
Heyman.
Is he a New York writer?
He's a online writer, an internet writer.
Oh, so
I don't think
he's not
he's-
a writer. He's not a real writer.
No, I don't think he's very good. And I was struck by his opposition, which was it was immediately after your last game. He said, now it's time to make sure he doesn't get into the Hall of Fame. Well, if there's legitimate grounds, I got no problem. To me, first of all, a Hall of Famer stands out. A Hall of Famer, I don't need to have you go in the Hall of Fame to know that you were a Hall of Fame umpire. I mean, you stood the test of time. You were there for game after game after game, confrontation if necessary. You called a game. Everybody knew they were going to get a fair shake when you called a game. But I don't need a Hall of Fame for that. But unfortunately, that's where we've gone in this world. It becomes then a popularity contest instead of how gifted someone was.
Agreed. That was excellent.
But usually what I say is excellent.
If you can only get it down on paper.
If you can only get it.
Wait.
I'm just wondering if I'm going to get that on the Twitter account. So.
Yeah, you should.
Oh, we can cut that. We can cut that for you, Frank. You still have to answer the question about the changes in the industry. I know you want to take control. I can see it, but we'd love to get your take on the changes.
Tell him to
in
get
the
his
industry.
own podcast.
Well, I long for the days that Buddy, Sally, and Rob were writing for the Alan Brady show on the Dick Van Dyke show, and those were the entire writing staff.
Oh.
Now we've got 12 to 14 executive producers on the show, and they're all writers, except for one person that's running the show. I miss those days. I miss the days that, again, it's back to the writer's strike. But do you guys, are any of you guys aware that when you get paid to write a show, you also get paid to write scripts? So, Billy, or are you aware of that? Because if
I know it's low pay.
it's not low pay. What do you consider low?
I know.
Let me say this.
Okay.
Let's say at the top of your game, you were making, and I maybe be presumptuous to assume I know, but $250,000 a year would kind of be the top. That's what they consider low pay. So a TV writer will make $250,000
If
a
they're
year.
doing a lot of scripts, you forget.
No.
You-
TJ, let me finish.
God, this guy bug you?
If they're doing no scripts, they're going to make $250,000 minimum. Every time they write a script, they get paid extra.
Well, they're not writers if they're not writing scripts. They're executive producers.
No,
So your argument goes down the drain.
but again, you're talking about something you don't know.
Hey, you forget. I wrote scripts.
Yeah.
And I dealt them around Hollywood.
Yeah.
And
And
never got a response. Never got a response.
yeah, well, you're like my plumber. My plumber also writes scripts. I came home one day. My plumber was in the house, and he said, "Mrs. Pace, I wrote a script. Can I give it to your husband?"
Let me drive out here again for this self-esteem seminar.
No, and I get it. The writers are underpaid, but they're not underpaid relative.
I don't care what a writer gets paid. I didn't get paid, so I don't care.
Right.
So make your case and get on with
Like ask Billy how much money he made collaborating on 3 books with me.
Well, I know one story about a plumber that a guy's talking about a plumber. The guy comes up and he says, "How much?" The psychiatrist, he says, he fixes his drain. He says, "How much do I owe you?" He says, "You owe me $700." He goes, "You only hit 2 hours." You go, "I owe you $700." He goes, "I'm a psychiatrist. I don't make $700 for 2 hours."
Yeah,
Plumber
well,
says,
all
"I
I
didn't
know-
either when I was a psychiatrist."
all I know is this is the first show I've ever been on with a plumber, and I think they called you a plumber, TJ.
Yeah, they did.
Too bad.
They did.
You know?
Yeah.
Oh,
They
now,
called you-
now you're taking sides with TJ, huh?
I told him
I
already.
did not take sides. I just made a statement.
Yeah.
It's the first show I've ever been on with a plumber.
He's already said writers were excellent. He's a man who understands.
He does.
Quick,
Yeah.
quick question for you, Frank. How many writers average on a weekly show? I mean, to get a script out, how many writers do they use? Average. You know.
12 to 15.
Wow.
12 to 15.
And the jokes are so scintillating.
Well, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. I long for the days when 3 or 4 writers. I mean, in my day, we had writing staffs of about 6 people, and they would all collaborate in a room. But this isn't my day. But that's the purpose of Derek's question.
Derek asked that question?
I think so.
Yeah.
He-
How is
God, he
everything
always brings
changed?
the show down.
no.
Thank you, TJ.
How have your industries changed?
Oh, I forgot.
So
All I know is Derek has one specific question, and you boys turn this elaborate, intelligent writer into a plumber. And that
Billy, how is firefighting changed?
Oh, it's changed a lot. Yeah, over the 40 years. Well, I don't know about 40 years, but I was on a job for 23 years, and towards the end of the career, it really got very safety orientated, which you would think would be a big boom for firemen, you know, because of OSHA and everything else. But a lot of guys resisted it because they wanted to be aggressive firefighting. You know, that's our thing, is to get in and got 3 rooms of fire in charge. You know, put the damn thing out as quickly as possible. Because that's one thing, you know, when you call a fire department, a lot of people say, hey, they show up fast. People don't realize we get there fast because we got less work to do. The longer you take to get to the fire, the worse it's going to be. And of course, there's lives involved, but it's changed a lot. And mostly with the fire safety chiefs and another fire safety chief. And they don't, things that we used to do super aggressively, they don't do anymore. They
Is
hold
it
you
for the
back.
Is it for the better?
Well, it's for the better. It definitely saves lives of firefighters, without a doubt. But firefighters resist it because they like the idea of just
Risky.
being super aggressive. Yeah.
Well, speaking for me and TJ, one thing that hasn't changed is you guys continue. I can't speak for you, Joe, but you guys continuously run toward danger where TJ and I would run away from danger.
Want no part of it.
Me
You see
either.
You see guys light up on my profession. Like if it's blowing through the roof and it's coming out 6 or 7 windows and they got people hanging from fire escapes, I mean, you can just see their eyes like, you know.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what now. Going into locker rooms after a team has lost a tough game, or, you know, that's running
He
towards
loves that.
danger. You know, when some guy is struck out 4 times and you walk in and say, what the hell's your problem? You know, you couldn't touch the ball.
I was telling my son last night, I was at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. This was when the AIDS crisis was first hit New York City. And when I pull up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I was the youngest guy on the rig. So I was the guy who takes care of the shit. You know, I was the young guy, the rookie. And there was a guy unconscious on the floor. There was about 25 people around him. And I said, oh, shit, I got to go over and give mouth to mouth. So I took a C cup and I put it down his thing. And I'm about to give mouth to mouth. And it dawned on me, AIDS, you know, shit, you know, mouth to mouth. I looked around at the 25 or 30 people and I says, hey, anybody know this guy? And this one guy in the back said, yeah, I know him. I says, does he have HIV? He No, he ain't got HIV. I said, oh, good. I was about to put my mouth on him. He said, I think he's got Blue Cross.
I think he's got Blue Cross.
Do you remember Milton Bradley?
Do I remember
Yeah.
Milton Bradley? Yes.
So when he came to town, I walked up to him, and this is the way I would usually approach people. I say, Milton, I hear you're a real dick. And that was our first meeting. And then about, a couple of months later, he got involved at Dodger Stadium where somebody threw a beer bottle at him, and he threw it back into the stands, and it got really ugly. And they kicked him off the field. But the only interview he would give would be to me because I was honest with him. I call him a dick. And so that's how it worked. If you were straight with competitors, these are all competitors. The only thing they understood was you get in their face and say, I'm not going anywhere. And so you actually took on the danger of confronting great athletes at the moment when they were so competitive. But they would lose everything, of course, if they struck back at you. But it was also the only way to get respect in those days.
Do you remember how we met, TJ?
Yeah, very forgettable. I don't remember, no.
So we were paired up at Rod Carew's golf tournament. So he says, how did you get here? And I said, well, I represent Rod Carew. And you said, well, he's a dick.
He is.
He's a dick. So I just blew it off, and then he hit his drive out of bounds like normal. And then I hit mine 250 down the middle of the fairway, and we proceeded to go play a couple of holes. Well, at the fourth hole, Rod comes driving up in a golf cart, and I said, Rod, here's T.J. Simers. He said you're a dick. And he goes, he's right. and then it kicked off a love affair between Rod Carew and T.J. Simers. That's the way it works.
It is the way it works. If you're straightforward with somebody, and you're not being mean, you're just telling them how it is, usually it works.
Yeah, we had, you were talking about Bradley, Milton Bradley, and he was, when he came to the National League, he was a problem.
Yeah.
For most crews, because he would complain that the sun came up.
Yep.
I mean, he was not pleasant to work with at all. I mean, he got kicked out a few times, and then Peter Gammons wrote a story about him, about how the umpires were baiting him.
Probably true.
It's not true. We went through all the ejection, when I was president of the union at the time, went through all the ejection reports and all the video of him getting kicked out of games, and he was, there was no evidence of that whatsoever. He was just hyper, high-strung, whatever. So I called Peter Gammons and I said, Peter, you just said in your column that we baited Milton Bradley as the staff of umpires. And he says, yeah, well, I got that. I said, Peter, you don't have to bait him. He's like a fish that will jump in the boat. And I said, well, if you don't believe me, you need to call Bob Watson, who's in charge of discipline for this. And so he did, and he retracted the story. But it was about 3 days later. So, and of course, it was on a later page. It wasn't on the front page like his first story. But yeah, I remember.
Do you remember? Did you deal at all with Manny Ramirez?
Yeah,
he was one of my favorite athletes. I thought he was so misunderstood. Came to LA and really owned the city. Put the Dodgers back on the map single-handedly with one of the great marches toward the end of the season, and was really a great guy. He made the mistake, the female hormone drug, which is probably not a good thing to take in this day and age, and didn't know how to handle himself publicly in that regard. But he was really a good guy. I don't know if you can tell that from a player who has a big reputation, whether you have enough interaction with him to know whether the guy is real or the image is what takes over.
Well, yeah, and you know what? If you take some of the most famous athletes that I've ever dealt with, a lot of it is their comfort zone. I mean, I played golf with Joe Namath. Joe Namath in a group like this, he'd be just as comfortable as he could be.
Mm-hmm.
But you put him in a crowd of people, he's not going to be pleasant. In fact, we had him in a golf tournament one time, and I would say that he was the worst celebrity we had because he wouldn't interact with anybody. He wouldn't shake hands. He wouldn't sign autographs. He wouldn't talk to anybody out of his group. But yet you get him in a situation where he knows everybody around him. He's very, very good to be with. And I think that Reggie Jackson, who's got a reputation that you probably helped make as being a bad guy, is a very good student of the game. He loves it. In fact, he loves all sports.
Well, he likes to tell people he's a student of the game and knows it all. So maybe I could see where you would buy it, but that's what he likes to do.
You're the guy that writes that you know it all, so this might be strike two for you.
I'm surprised the Namath was would be introverted in the group. You would think he'd be more.
I did too, and I had made Giannis. I was doing some PR work with Giannis. I got Giannis to give him a driver, and that's how we first met. The first time we played golf was at Bear Lakes in West Palm Beach, and because he was a charter member there, they let us go off the back nine. So the first hole's right into the sun, and I hit the ball good, and I looked up and said, I never saw it. Namath said, a man in your profession should never admit so.
Did you ever miss a call, Joe?
No, I never missed one. I didn't call them all right, but I was out there for every one of them.
Look at TJ shaking his head.
It's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. You had 44 years to figure out a response to that question, and the best you can come up with is, no, I never missed one. Come on.
This is my fourth year in the game, and I told Dick Williams that exact same story. He said, just tell me you missed it, and I'll go away. I said, I've been here 4 years, and I've never missed one. He said, you can't be that arrogant. I said, it's not arrogant. I don't call them all right, but I've been out here for all of them. I've never missed one. And he just shook his head, started laughing, and left.
I'm gonna tee one up for TJ. Did you ever write a bad column?
Oh God, yes. Oh yeah. When you approach the line as often as I did, I went over the line, and it was a bad column. That's why with an umpire, I can't believe that as the next pitch is on the way, your brain still isn't rolling that over. Did I blow that call? Did they have a point? Were they right? So you never second guess yourself that whole process.
Oh, I think you have. Yeah, I think everybody has.
Well, then don't be so contradictory. I don't understand what you're trying to say.
Well, I wasn't being contradictory. I said I don't call them all right. I said that, but I've never missed one. I think the biggest thing is that people don't realize, especially people that have never umpired at all, would think that an umpire lives and dies for every call. I mean, I feel bad when I see an umpire miss a call on TV, even though I know they can go to replay now and correct it. But I don't think people realize how special the baseball umpire is, especially in the major leagues, where they try to get everything right. And believe me, it eats at them. It eats at them when they think they missed one. I worked with an umpire one year named Andy Fletcher, and he came to me, and they live and die on this zone evaluation that they give them. So they look at that every day to see if I can get better, see if I missed this pitch or that pitch. And Andy came to me and he says, the machine said I missed 6 pitches yesterday. And Andy was a very good plate umpire, he still is. And I said, I was working second base. I didn't see a pitch that I could even question what you called. He said, yeah, the machine said I missed 6. And he's upset.
6 out of how many?
I said, how many did the machine miss? He said, oh, it didn't track 14. So I said, let me get this straight. We're going to start using the machine that misses twice as many pitches as you do? And of course, then that kind of broke the ice. But I don't think people realize that when that machine misses a pitch, it doesn't call anything. When the umpire misses a pitch, he calls something. But and I think that's what their biggest problem about replacing the plate umpire is the machines doesn't call all the pitches, and that's a bad thing. So, but I think there's a misconception out there that umpires don't care. That's not true. They care about every pitch.
So how did you feel when they would go to replay and the two umpires would be standing there waiting to hear on their headsets whether or not the call was correct or not, and it would be overturned? Did you take that personally?
No, because and we tried to teach this to all of our umpires when we put replay in. They're the extra official on the field to help you get everything right. They're not there to hurt you. They're there to help you. And it took a while, probably a year and a half, before we could get everybody to buy into that theory that replay official is there to help you. He's not there to hurt you. And I think the greatest thing about the replay system is every umpire has to go into it. They have to work at least 2 weeks of the year in replay. And when they do, they see all the angles from all the games, because now you're in the same room with the other 7 umpires that are there for replay. And if there's a replay over here on screen 4, everybody goes and watches it. And they go over there and look to see if you're in position, if you used the right timing, if you were concentrating on what you were doing. So they learn from it. And I think the replay system has helped umpire to become better. I think it's helped all the umpires be better. So I think early on, you may be right. People would take it as, oh, he overturned my call. But after they understand what this is about, I don't think they feel that way anymore. And in fact, I think they relish the fact that it's up there to keep them out of the newspaper article that says I missed that play and it cost the Minnesota Twins the game. I think the replay has helped the officiating.
No, objectively, I think when you're watching replays, you realize how good the umpires and the refs are. Really.
All I know is I would write, if they didn't have that, these guys wouldn't know what the hell they're doing. That's the way I would write it.
You know, that might be strike 3. You better
Oh, that's pretty funny. That's pretty funny. What else you want to talk about?
Who's going to win the Derby today? Oh, I'm not supposed to ask that.
Yeah,
because it's too early. The show's going to be on in like 10 days. Who's going to win the Derby?
Now.
Do you know? Have you ever heard of it? It's the Kentucky Derby. They run it in May most years.
I think he's asking that to me. Yeah, I know it. We have an umpire that lives in Louisville, and he takes that time off every year so he can go to the Derby.
So who's going to win it?
Probably him, because he's got a case of bourbon that he's already set aside for the Derby. Who cares about who wins the Derby? You know.
That's right, TJ. Who cares about who wins the Derby?
Oh my God!
One of my favorite columns ever, Hunter S. Thompson, the Kentucky Derby. That's a great column. That's a great.
Does he write about the Derby? Frank, you didn't tell me he writes about the Derby. He knows horses too.
No, Billy?
No, not me. I can't write about shit.
he knows what horses didn't win.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Slow horses and fast women. That's the downfall of every man.
Every man, not TJ. TJ got the...
I love horse racing. I love Zenyatta. Zenyatta gave me my most thrilling moment in all of sports.
I worked with her. She was in Shake It Up.
Yeah.
Zendaya. Oh, that's Zendaya.
Zendaya.
Yeah. I guess that was a form of humor.
At least you didn't say you wrote her anyway.
Do you even know? Have you ever even heard of Zenyatta? You, Joe.
Zenyatta.
Isn't that what the kids swing at when they got the blindfold on?
This is just sacrilege.
Oh.
So what else do you want to talk about?
I'm fine. I'm just
Joe.
No, we got to ask some hard questions.
Okay,
Come
Joe.
on.
You want to hear some hard
Questions.
hard hitting?
You got some prepared. I know you have
Okay,
more.
I've already asked the guy a bunch of
Okay.
questions. I even brought up the fact that somebody was trying to keep him out of the Hall of Fame. As
Right,
ludicrous
yeah.
as that sounded.
Yeah, that is ludicrous. True.
It is ludicrous. It's going to...
Oh, sure. Jump on the bandwagon now. I didn't hear any of you guys
The vote's
bringing it up to him.
The vote's going to be in
I'm afraid the umpire might get mad at me, so I'm not going to bring up anything like that.
The vote's in December. The vote's in December.
I don't care when the hell the vote is.
Yes, you do.
All I care about is, does he go in or does he not?
I say yes.
Okay. I don't know. First ballot, can you get in like that?
Well, he's not going to be first ballots. There's going to be one ballot, and there'll be no ballot for another 4 years.
Yeah, it's a committee, and it meets like every 4 years, like Frank said.
Okay. And do you have any ambassadors on there for you?
I have no idea who's on the committee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we won't know until probably 3 months before.
Well, you know, Frank made it his mission to get the tall guy,
Artis Gilmore.
Artis Gilmore. into the Hall of Fame. And he really made himself into a pain in the ass because he would tell everybody that Artis Gilmore had to go into the Hall of Fame, and he got him in. So if Frank is one of your ambassadors, you got a decent shot.
Yeah, but unfortunately, T.J. Simers at tjsimerspage2.com has nearly not the readership that he used to have on the LAtimes.com. So
That's true. I don't have anything going for me now. I got a wife who's about 50 years we've been married, and one dog that's still living. The other one is dead. Nothing but come and sit in your garage and talk to an old umpire. That's as exciting as it gets for me.
And you had to drive 40 miles to do it.
Yes, exactly.
My goodness, you're 40 miles away?
Yeah. I can't afford to live in Pasadena. Did you ever hear of Yorba Linda?
Yes, I had. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where Tommy Lasorda used to live.
It is. Tommy and I used to meet for breakfast probably once a week, or definitely a couple times a month.
How many times did he pick up the tab?
Well, he didn't.
Yeah.
He didn't think he should. And the restaurant, wouldn't make him do it. Tommy was a fascinating guy. You're absolutely correct when you said he's full of himself. That was who he was. That was, once you understood that and you didn't let that rankle you, he was so colorful. He was like you, he was good for the game.
Huh?
A manager like that, I think, makes baseball better. He was clever. And, he tells the Harvey Wendelstedt story where he had Don Rickles dressed as a pitching coach. And he sent Rickles out to the mound to get, I think it was some
Latino pitcher
to take him out of the game. And the guy said, "You're not the manager, right? You can't take me out." And so now Wendelstedt comes from home plate. And he said, "What's the problem?" "Oh, Don, how you doing? Can I get 2 tickets for Las Vegas for your show in Las Vegas?"
And Rickles tells almost that same story verbatim.
Yeah, that
verbatim.
was, and it never came out at the time because he had just had another celebrity play Bat Boy. It was Tony
Danza?
Yeah, Danza, and he had gotten fined for that. So they couldn't put that story out where he had Rickles go on the field and remove a pitcher.
It was the last game of the season, and the Dodgers were woefully out of it. So Lasorda couldn't send anybody out there. He could have sent you out there, and he wouldn't have got reprimanded by Harry Wendelstedt.
But he made the game interesting because he was a character. And on a sad front, he had a gay son, and he would always talk to me. That boy used to have so many girls around him, and I would tell him, "Shut up, Tommy. I'm tired of hearing about all the girls that this guy had. The kid was gay. Accept it." And he said, "I can't accept that." And the kid finally died, and he was at the bedside of the kid. And the kid said, "I'm sorry, Dad, for doing what I did." And Tommy, to his credit, said, "All that mattered was that I had you as my son, and I'd give anything for another hour, another year, or whatever." And Lasorda came through at the right time. But it hurt him.
He did that publicly. He did that privately. He didn't do that publicly.
Right. He did it. Yeah.
He did it privately.
What's the difference?
There's a big difference, but I won't get into that because you're such a Tommy kiss ass, and you've been kissing Tommy's ass for 30 years.
Let's talk about some of the other people that you don't like in sports.
I love everybody.
No, you don't. You have a list of people that you don't like.
Oh, that's the way. Go
ahead. Start with one.
Tommy Lasorda.
Yeah. You didn't like him.
I didn't like him at all because he was a fake. He was a fake, phony, and a fraud. Then that's...
Hey, if you're on... You deal with the Hollywood stage, which is made for the fake.
Phonies and frauds.
Yes!
You are correct.
No,
but
Tommy lived with the same woman in the same house in Fullerton that whole time. Yeah. And I've heard all the stories about all the shenanigans and everything else. But that's the way he did it.
Mm-hmm.
See, Joe, I mean...
This
is why
you perpetuated the myth of Tommy Lasorda.
Good. I hope so.
Yeah, good.
I think he was good for the game.
Good. I think Joe West is good for the game. I think T.J. Simers was good for the game.
And I don't think who was the Angels manager? Mike Scioscia was a good manager at all in any way, shape, or form.
You don't think so?
No.
Well,
he's a great guy.
He modeled himself after Tommy.
No, he didn't. He was a great guy. fantastic guy, but he couldn't win. Won once the World Series like in 2002 or something, and then was only in a 4-team division and couldn't win again, and even all the way to the very end for almost 20 years.
Well, fortunately, his successors have done much better.
Well, the big problem with the Angels is they didn't give him any pitching.
You're thinking about that.
You know, he was he knew the rules probably better than most managers. And
Probably, yeah.
He knew them backwards and forwards, and I've only seen a couple of managers that could manage the game according to what's happening with the rules going on. Well, maybe 3: Dick Williams, Frank Robinson, and Socha.
Oh God, I can't stand Frank Robinson. Oh my Lord! Don't even mention that name. Don't put me in a bad mood, for God's sakes.
Well, I'm not going to put you in a bad mood. Frank had one statement that you could probably dwell on, and he said, "My mother told me that I should listen more than talk."
Amen. Amen.
But I thought Socha did exceptionally well for what he was given. You're picking on a guy there about his ability to manage. You know, the players win the games. The manager has to put them in position to win the game.
He had a lot to do with picking those players.
Well, I'm not so sure about that because, you know, didn't he go over there when Gene Autry was still alive?
Yes.
And
Then Disney took over, and then Artie Moreno, who I don't have much faith in either.
By the way, your list is much longer than me.
That's true.
Seems like it.
But you were talking about Rickles a while ago, and one of the funniest things that ever happened to an umpire was Bruce Fleming got tickets to go see Rickles in Vegas, and he took his wife Rosemarie there. And before the show started, Rickles saw him in the audience, and he went out and he started his show. And he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you, so they got a fabulous friend here from Major League Baseball. He's been a long time umpire. His name is Bruce Fleming." Bruce was already standing up. He says, "Bruce, stand up, will you?" He said, oh, you are. And he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, you know the World Series is going on right now as we sit here at this show tonight." He says, "And the reason Bruce is not there is he's not very good." I mean, he just buried it. And of course, his wife is rolling. She thinks it's the funniest thing she's ever seen.
By the way, Bruce Fleming did something that, from an umpire point of view, that I would like your perspective on. So he's umpiring at home plate. Milt Pappas is throwing a perfect game. It's a 3-2 pitch, and Bruce called it ball 4. It was, well, depending on everybody's point of view, borderline, outside. That was history in the making. Would you have gone that fine a point to call it ball 4?
Well, I'd call it what it is. And I think Bruce thought he called it a ball because it was a ball. In fact, they went in after the game, and one of the reporters said, well, if you'd have called that a strike, you'd have been the 13th umpire to ever call a perfect game. And Bruce said, "Can you name any of the other 12?
Perfect. Perfect.
That's a great answer.
Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, that's what he said. Can you name any of the other 12? Not just the last one, I mean any of the other 12. And they couldn't. So I give a lot of credit to Bruce for being his own man. I think, and you know what? That's another thing. You say, well, that was a controversial call. No, it wasn't. It was either right or it was wrong.
Well, I have one exception to that point, which is Galarraga's perfect game, which was ruined by an umpire made an out call that he made a safe call and he should have been out.
Right, but the point is, it wasn't a controversial call. It was wrong.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't believe he was intentionally calling the guy safe.
Correct.
Because he was safe. I think there's a bad misconception when you try to put things out there. Well, he's looking for trouble. No, they're not. They're doing their job, and you need to understand that. And I think that is driven by the media. That's driven by the TV people. It's driven by the press. It's wrong.
And to your credit, Joe, I know you went back to the Major League Baseball and asked Galarraga to be credited with a perfect game when they reviewed that call after the game, and Major League Baseball declined your request.
That isn't going to work.
Well,
Well, that's nice that he was, he went belly up at the right time, but that's not right.
Well, I agree.
No, you're right, and Frank's right too. I mean, we made an effort to take the pressure off of Jimmy Joyce and to give the kid credit for pitching a perfect game. And I understand the commissioner's position. He can't do that. He can't change the rules, just like a lot of decisions they make. They can't change things, and I get that. But we did take up for the umpire as well as the player, and I don't think anybody felt worse about that than Jimmy Joyce, the umpire that made the call. And yet, when the game was over, Jimmy Leland argued profusely during that situation. But when the game was over, he was in the umpire's locker room, consoling him for what happened. And
the next day, Galarraga shook his hand at home plate.
brought the lineup
Oh,
cards.
that's sweet. That's just my heart just jumped a beat.
You always seem like a sentimental
That
guy,
is
TJ.
such a nice thought. Can we put that on a Mother's Day cards or something?
Sure.
God. I'm
Do I
glad.
give him a strong four for that?
No, you can throw him out of the game.
God.
You can throw him out of the garage.
They're out of the garage.
You're out of the garage.
But before we go, guys, we should ask you all who you're going to vote for the 2024 election.
Well, can you tell us who's going to run? Who's going to be alive?
Give me your thoughts. Give me your thoughts on that.
Can you tell us who's going to be alive?
There's nobody worth a damn. So how can you?
Okay, so we should, this is sort of a long discussion, but we should ask, why is that the case? Why do you think that is? I mean, we have some pretty terrible choices in the country. Why do you think that is?
We've had terrible choices for the last 40 years.
Country is so divided. That means 50% of the people out there are going to rip the hell out of you every single day.
Right.
Do you want to spend the rest of your years dealing with the negativity, the anger, the fabrication, whatever words you throw to it? I don't think it's worth it. I mean, what are you getting out of it? The idea of service and being present. Okay, I get that, but not at the expense of all the other bullshit.
Unfortunately, we won't have to deal with it for 25 more years.
What are you talking about?
Oh,
He's saying something to the effect of the fourth quarter.
you'll be dead. That's what I'm saying. You'll be dead.
You ain't playing the back nine anymore. You're playing the last two holes.
Joe, this has been such a thrilling experience.
You'll be dead.
Have my self-esteem attacked, and then the suggestion that I'm going to die.
Okay, so let's put it in perspective. If you, and Derek, this would be a good question for everybody. If you were president, what would you do to fix it? What would you do to fix this mess?
If you could do anything,
Yeah.
nobody could run for more than 6 years. Nobody can hold any office for more than 6 years, and there would be no term limits.
Okay, I think that's a good start. I think the other better. Well, in addition to that,
No,
I'd
you
like to
don't
see.
say better. Thank you. Say addition,
Yeah, I would
because-
say in addition to that would be we need to take money out of politics. So
So you had an opinion on this, so you broached the subject so
So he
you could give your opinion.
no, he asked my opinion, so I gave it.
Where does it say that the
what I'm
guy who's
trying-
like a director or a producer or whatever the hell you call him is all of a sudden now providing questions that he can answer, so it's his show?
I make the rules so he can do that questions.
Yeah.
Ah.
Well, what I'm asking is because we have.
Now I know why we're in the garage and why this podcast isn't going anywhere. Well, go ahead. Tell us who you
It's
think.
going to go somewhere today because we're going to get this all online quickly. But I need your opinion, TJ.
I don't have one. I told you that.
No, you do have an opinion. It's impossible for you not to have an opinion.
You have not presented me with any viable subject that would
I think that's
inspire me.
I think that's a cop out because I think we're talking right now.
Joe,
I think we're talking
Well,
about politics. You said the country was divided. So
geez, I didn't break new ground.
What
there.
about Billy?
What do I think about fixing things? Well, yeah, I would definitely be worried about the ethics on the Supreme Court, but I think my biggest thing would be you shouldn't be allowed to run for Congress unless you can pass a basic citizenship test. At least have some idea how the Constitution works, or some idea how the country's run. Because there's a lot of senators and a lot of congressmen out there that have their head up so far up their ass they don't even know how it works. That's what I think.
Well, some of the big issues are, why are we giving so much money to Ukraine when we could have started and ended a war with Russia before we would have spent this amount of money? The other one is the border. The border needs to be secured. But I think the funniest thing is we have people running this country that can vote themselves a raise or vote themselves benefits, and yet they're bankrupting our Social Security for people who depend on money after they retire. So I think that those people in Congress should have to give back all their retirement money and put it in Social Security, because those people aren't federal employees. They're sent there as representatives of their state, and if they are going to get paid, they should be paid by the states that send them there. I think the president should be paid by the party that elects him, and I think the Supreme Court should be paid by the cases they hear. And that would free up a lot of money that they're wasting by giving them to people who all they do is they go to their office every day and try to solicit votes or raise money to solicit votes.
60% of every day is based on raising money, and I just think until you can get
where'd you
money,
come up with that number out of the sky?
No, it's
the Frank Pace sky.
I got
60% of every single day.
It's 60 minutes. So, given the fact that you challenge me or I challenge 60 minutes, I would go with 60 minutes. The most respected name in news broadcasting today. I just think you got to get money out of politics, and you just, the only way you can do that
people are all living in a dream world.
I know it's a dream world, but the question was how you do it.
Quality human being who inspires, who has charisma,
Yes.
Somebody who's
not going to be
it's America. America relies on the hero,
and who's somebody who can't be reelected.
So
who just do his job for 6 years.
Stop putting caveats on it.
6 years and get out of there. 6 years and get out of there.
Okay, so who is that? That was.
We don't have one.
You don't have one now because you don't have the system for it.
No, forget about the person who's in the system, like, somebody, a congressman or a senator or somebody that's in politics. Who do you think? Anybody, you could elect anybody tomorrow. Anybody. The Rock.
Well, I got a guy for you that would be president, and he'd be very good, but he won't take it. And I think he's a little too old for the job, too, and that's Peter Ueberroth.
Oh, he's horrible. Come on.
Anybody that can...
Have you heard him talk? Have you heard him talk?
Yeah, I heard him talk.
Okay.
He says the first thing he would do if he was president would be set up a budget. And he said, you wouldn't leave until the budget was fixed. I mean, that sounds like an intelligent plan to me.
That sounds like umpire talk. Tough talk. You're not going to leave until we get this budget figured out.
Yeah.
Who would you pick?
I just said, I don't think there's anybody that has surfaced that demonstrates what I'm talking about. I don't think I'm not inspired by, I don't all of a sudden, I got to go hear that guy talk. There isn't anybody there right now.
Nobody.
Well, you would vote for Tom Lasorda, so because he's good for the game.
Well, if I have to pick a dead man, okay.
Okay, pick a dead man.
He wouldn't last 5 minutes on the scrutiny of all the things that he did.
No, that's not his
no, I know.
qualifications. I mean, I like the people like John Wooden and Joe Torre. Those people had heft. They had character. They got more than just
Bill Bradley had heft and character.
Yeah.
So we have agreed if it was we would all vote for Bill Bradley if it was president.
I would vote for Bill Bradley.
See that?
I'm not going with Bill Bradley, Princeton guy, right?
We've got a consensus.
So now we just need to find a Bill Bradley.
Ask.
Yes.
That's not our age.
Is he still alive?
Yeah, he's our age.
Way to go, Joe West. You picked somebody who at least was still alive. You're still on your game.
All right. What have we done enough damage for one day?
I think so.
Yeah, I got to get home and watch the Derby.
Oh, that's right. You got to get home and watch the Derby.
I got to watch the Knicks.
Yeah, forget about it.
Knicks.
And I told you guys make no references because both of those things will be over by the time this airs.
Do you take
But this-
any interest in the NBA refs and the job they have to do?
Joe.
Yeah, we were friends with a lot of those guys. Joey Crawford was Jerry Crawford's brother,
Mhm.
and their dad was Shag Crawford.
Right.
I'm part of the National League for over 20 years, and Shag actually got let go just before the Red Sox, the Boston Red Sox, Cincinnati Reds series, because he refused to break a union rule where we were on a rotation system, and they didn't have a single crew chief left in the rotation to umpire that World Series that year. So all 6 umpires that worked the World Series between the Red Sox and Cincinnati Reds, it was their first World Series. And none of them were crew chiefs. Not one person on the crew was a crew chief. And because the union had a contractual agreement with the leagues, they couldn't put Shag Crawford in there because he had worked the World Series before Dick Stello and Saps Davidson, and I'm trying to remember who the other guy was. Was Andy Olson or Nick Close? Yeah, it was one of those guys. Anyway, Shag refused to work, and so Chuck Feeney let him go. And that was wrong. And of course, Shag didn't fight it. He was one of those guys that said, well, you don't want me to work for you. I ain't working for you. And his son, Jerry, later became union president. And Joey, the younger brother, went to the NBA the same year that I went to the National League. So I've known them for years.
And Joey
So-
became a very polarizing figure as a NBA referee.
Well, he did.
But do you watch the games and do you react to the calls or non-calls that are made?
Well, the NBA, yes. Yeah, I think that's one of the tougher sports to officiate. In fact, Rick Barry actually told me one time, he said, the NBA referees aren't very good. He said, but they're the best in the world at what they do. And it's a tough job because there are angles they can't get to. There's stuff they can't see because the bodies are so big. And I mean, Joey came to the NBA after they had put in the 3-man system. But before he got there were just 2 of them running up and down. So that's a tough job. And it's really funny because his brother Jerry, who umpired with me, said, my brother took me to work this high school game. I'm thinking this is going to be great. And said, I called a foul on this guy, and I got my hand up. I got the numbers right. The basket was good and everything. And I turned around there running the other way. I forgot to blow the damn whistle. He said that was it for me. I only did one game.
With that, I think we're going to close this love fest. It's been a pleasure having Joe West. It's been a pleasure having Timmy, Billy's son, in our audience. It's been a pleasure having you
Good to be
again,
here.
and it's been a pleasure having you, Derek.
This is TV goop that they do at the very end. Everybody loves everybody. Let's
I-
all get in a circle and hold hands.
You notice I didn't say it's been a pleasure having you, TJ. That's what I was building up to, but again, you ruined the joke. But
Well,
it wasn't much of a joke.
He's already struck out. Don't worry.
Well, thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe. It's good seeing you, brother.
See you
Take care.
See you next week, I guess. 2 weeks, whenever we do this again.
Good luck on the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, brother.
for
It's gonna
sure.
happen.
Thank you very much.
TJ,
You're very
TJ,
kind.
it was a pleasure.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Now can I go home?
Yes, please. Take your headset off. Take your head. Hey, Joe, why don't you throw him out of the garage? Throw him out of
He's outta here.
and we're out of here.
All right, we're out of here.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you, Derek.
Adios, Phyllis.
All right.
Next week's guest, Pulitzer Prize winning photographer John Philo. His iconic Kent State photo changed our lives forever.